Welcome to Hope Natural Health, the podcast inspiring you to be your best version. Join me, your host, Dr. Erin, naturopathic doctor, dog mom, cancer survivor, and girl boss weekly as we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Welcome back, everyone, to a fresh new podcast episode. Last week, we discussed all about gut health with a special guest, Mark McLean. So take a listen to that. It was a really, really good conversation. He's from the UK, so I could talk to him for hours because his accent is so cool. So make sure you take a listen to that. But this week, I'm going to be talking all about stress. I'm sure we're all familiar with stress, and maybe we have a sense of that it affects our health, but do we really know how or why? And that's what we're going to dive into today. If you want to train your body to be more resilient to stress so it doesn't have so much control over our life, it helps us to understand the stress hormones and what our body does with stress. So the two hormones that are involved with stress are cortisol and adrenaline, also known as epinephrine. Here's the difference between them. Adrenaline is released rapidly as an immediate response to stress, whereas cortisol is released in a daily rhythm regulated by the brain and the HPA axis, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Adrenaline has fast effects to activate the body when in danger. Think fight or flight, being chased by a tiger, whereas cortisol has slower effects that are not as obvious to track. Adrenaline increases our heart rate and can make us feel anxious during intense moments, whereas cortisol has longer-term health effects related to metabolism, sleep, brain, and mood. We oftentimes measure cortisol. I oftentimes do not measure adrenaline. Cortisol really is the backbone behind stress, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this guy because he is super important, and I don't know why I said he. This hormone is very important. Did you know the stress hormone cortisol follows this 24-hour rhythm? This pattern of the diurnal curve helps us feel alert in the morning and calm at night like this. Cortisol peaks within 30 minutes of waking to really jumpstart our body for the day. It's really what gets us out of bed. The levels start to decline throughout the afternoon and into the evening, and it's lowest at midnight to allow us for a restful sleep. This can be shifted by your own body sleep-wake cycle too. So even though I said midnight, if you go to bed a lot earlier, it could be at its lowest, say around 10 p.m., 9 p.m., depending on your schedule. Or if you're a shift worker, it could be flipped 10 a.m. if you work night shifts. But if we have stress or lifestyle changes that disrupt this natural rhythm, cortisol can actually be persistently high, making us feel anxious or sleepless. It could be persistently low, which makes us feel fatigued and even moody. Or it can be flipped, making us feel tired in the morning and wired at night. Cortisol is considered the stress hormone, but it also influences our metabolism, weight, inflammation, our blood pressure, our brain function, our mood, and really so much more. It truly is the backbone to a lot of health conditions. So we should know by now that stress really is no joke. That's because this hormone, cortisol, has a ripple effect on just about every aspect of physical and mental health. So some examples of this are our immune function. Cortisol actually helps keep inflammation in check, but too much cortisol can lower our body's ability to fight off infections and illness. So if you're in a chronic state of fight or flight, you might be more prone to becoming ill or have recurrent infections or illnesses. It affects our blood sugar. Cortisol increases our blood sugar to help us respond to stress, but if this keeps happening, it can lead to insulin resistance and blood sugar issues over time. This also can be a result of increased weight gain, which leads us to belly fat. Chronically elevated cortisol leads to that weight gain, particularly around the middle. Bloating and digestion. The gut is our second brain and responds to stress hormones too. We talked a lot about this in last week's episode, to take a listen to that one. Emotional health, again, something else we talked about last week, but cortisol can contribute to anxiety, restlessness, apathy, and other mood changes. So what do? This is one of the most significant root causes of health issues in so many of my patients. What we do is look at what is actually happening with cortisol and then come up with a plan to bring it back to a healthy and natural rhythm. Here are another few things that can actually spike cortisol. So when we think about what's actually causing or creating stress in the body, it might not be what you think. So there are the usual suspects like, oh my gosh, I'm running late for work. Your toddlers are throwing tantrums in public. We might be getting stuck in a traffic jam. We have a list of to-dos that never seems to be getting done. But here's some others that might contribute to this stress response. We might not be eating enough. So under-eating can cause a spike in cortisol. Over-exercising can have an imbalance or cause an imbalance in our cortisol. Staying up late. The most important thing that you can do is be consistent with your sleep and wake schedule. Scrolling screens before bed can have a negative impact on our cortisol. And chugging coffee instead of food. So there is research that having coffee on an empty stomach that has sweetener and cream and calories in it can have a negative effect on our stress response. So black coffee is different, but there is some research that starting your day off with coffee without food can actually do more harm to our adrenals and our stress response than good. Any of those things can really trigger the cascade of stress hormones. That means any of them, if repeated over time, can disrupt cortisol and contribute to chronic health issues. So let's flip the narrative on this. Instead of normalizing habits and lifestyles that stress the body, don't you think it's time we start normalizing habits and lifestyles that put the body in a state of feeling safe and calm? So if you're ready to start managing stress in your body, I'd love to chat. You can book a discovery call with us at Hope Natural Health, and I love to help you get to the bottom of stress, and let's break the stress cycle forever. I'll see you all again next week.